Hello, everybody, and welcome to another finest episode of Complacency Learning. Ladies and gentlemen, in this show, Ziawa, Ziakipa, it goes down, it happens. This is not a show where we just sit and joke around. This is a show where we educate your child, where we help your child or your children make informed career decisions. Not only are we helping your children, we are helping you as a parent as well, or as a guardian, to actually help your kids make informed career decisions. Ladies and gentlemen, without wasting time, I'm going to jump into today's episode. We are joined by a very interesting individual all the way from America. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking about a gentleman who has served in the police office as a police officer and who is a writer and a podcaster at the same time. Ladies and gentlemen, without wasting time, I'm going to go ahead and welcome Frank Zafiro. Right, ladies and gentlemen, please do watch up till the end because there's a lot to learn. I mean, this gentleman has a lot of interesting content to share with us, and I really suggest that you recommend that you watch till the end, as there's a lot to learn. And while you're at it, ladies and gentlemen, please remember to grab some popcorn so you can keep that attention going for long and enjoy. Ladies and gentlemen, let's just dive onto it and let's learn together. Hi, Frank. Welcome to today's episode. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
That's awesome. It's an honor to have you on our show here. And we cannot wait to hear what you have for us, So we believe that a lot of us are gonna learn, including myself, as I believe that from your profession, well, there's a lot of interesting stuff, right? So I'd rather leave it to you to actually share with us. Right. So before we begin, can I ask you to tell us who Frank Scalise Zafiro is?
He's two different people, I guess, isn't he? I was born and raised in the Pacific Northwest of the U.S. And after a short stint in the military, I became a police officer, which I did for 20 years and a day. So I had a career in law enforcement in Spokane, Washington, which is in the eastern part of that state, tucked up in the very northwest most part of the continental U.S. I did a lot of different things in my career that we can certainly talk about, but I retired as a captain in 2013. And then my other career really has been going on since I was very young, and that is as a writer. But I really didn't start commercially becoming an author until about 2006 when my first novel was published. And so I write crime fiction under the pen name of Frank Zafiro. I've published over 30 books at this point. And so that's the other career.
Well, that's actually great. And it's actually interesting. Hey, I mean, the way you communicating with the world. I mean, they said books is another way of communicating with the world. And it's actually great that you actually have a message to send out to the world, and looking at the fact that you also serve as a police officer, it's great because people like you are the ones who are keeping the country safe. I mean, you're actually keeping us safe, right? So diving into my first question, right? So when you began your career as a writer and as a police officer, there are things that you didn't know that you actually got to find out about when you were already in the career, right? So which brings me to this question: what do you wish you had known before you began your career as a both police officer and a writer?
It's an excellent question. I think as a writer, I wish I had known two things early on, and I guess early on for me you could say that's for someone in their early 20s or even back to early teens. But the two things I would have liked to have known was one, you can do this. Everybody out there, no matter how they appear on the outside, suffer from a little bit of the imposter complex. They feel like they can't believe they're actually doing this, or how everyone else knows how to do it and I'm faking it, and everything else. Everybody suffers from that to some degree or another. And I think it's good to just know that, you can do this, whatever this is.
mm,
Unless it's physically impossible. I can't flap my arms and fly, but I can write a
mm,
book. So I would have liked to have known that. But conversely, I would have liked to have known that it isn't easy, that you have to dedicate yourself to the craft and to the art and to being a lifelong learner in your field if you want to be successful, and if you want to grow. And so I think I would have liked to have known the scope of that early on in my career. And oddly enough, I think you could apply the same two things somewhat to my policing career. I never doubted, once I decided to go into law enforcement, that I could accomplish it. Um, but I think, actually, I think I'm going to change my answer there. I think it would have been more important if I had known going into law enforcement a few things about how to avoid some of the traps that exist for people who go into that profession, thinking traps and behavioral traps that are not necessarily that are initially healthy and become unhealthy. Things like restricting um, your friends and call, or your friends circle becomes mostly all law enforcement, and there's a reason for that. It's kind of, they understand you, they understand what you're going through, you can speak shorthand. You share frustrations, and you don't have to explain why something is the way that it is when it looks bad from the outside, but it's essential that it's done that way and people don't understand why. Hey, you don't have to explain that to someone else in the profession. And so it kind of keeps you balanced early on, but then as your career goes forward and you get years and years on the job, it kind of has a deleterious effect because you lose touch with that very community that you're there to protect and serve, and you become insular, and it can affect kind of the ability to have a worthwhile dialogue with community members and to understand each other. And so I think, I'm sure somebody did warn me about that. And I'm sure because I was 25 years old and I knew everything, I didn't listen to them. So I don't know if it's something I
mm,
wish I would have known. It's something I wish I would have listened to.
mm,
But certainly that was a danger in law enforcement that I would have liked to have perhaps avoided the effects of for so long.
mm. Well, I don't think it's because you knew everything there. I think you were just following your passion or something, you know. When you
Well,
follow
as a
your
youngster, you
passion.
tend to overestimate how much you know, though.
Yeah,
Those
yeah, that
those
is
old,
true.
those old guys don't know what they're talking about. They're just old.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So what can we say? It's the world we live in, eh? Right. So looking into your career, right? So there were obviously some moments where you felt like you had failed, and you thought that, at some point maybe you probably thought of giving up. You thought maybe it wasn't worth going anymore, right? But at some point you managed to dust yourself off, up, I mean, and then you got up and started moving forward again, right? So now, going to the next question, um what was your biggest failure and what did you learn from it?
Oh, wow. You are very good at forming excellent questions.
Thank you.
In my law enforcement career, my biggest
Mm,
failure, um, you know, I spent the first half of my career doing line work. In other words, I was a patrol officer, I was a detective, I was, out there doing the heavy lifting that the profession does. And those, that's the whole reason we're there, right? Is for people to do that where the rubber meets the road, so to speak. But about halfway through my career, I promoted to sergeant and took on a leadership role, which I hadn't actually planned. It wasn't something I had set out to do. But once I became a leader, I embraced it wholeheartedly. I became a student of leadership. I took it very seriously, and so forth. And I had a leadership philosophy that was essentially, actually, ironically, or maybe comically, I took my leadership cues from Captain James T. Kirk of the Starship Enterprise. And people laugh when I say that, but not having been a student of leadership prior to that, and not really getting a lot of training initially, I kind of had to come up with my own philosophy to a degree, or my own thoughts on the matter. And when I thought of Kirk, I always remembered how, because I was a big Trekkie when I was growing up, and I always thought Kirk was just the bomb. He always was concerned with two things. He was concerned with the mission, and he was concerned with his people, and in almost equal parts. I mean, occasionally the mission took precedence, occasionally the people did. So there was some discretion there, but those were the two factors that he focused on, and so that's what I did, and that was my leadership philosophy. The biggest failure came though because especially when I became a lieutenant, um, there was some conflict between myself and my superiors, my captain and the major specifically, um, because I thought I knew best. I mean, I guess there's a theme developing here, and I, in particular, I became the unit commander for the Canine unit, which is the dogs, the patrol dogs that find people and so forth, catch criminals and so forth, and the drug sniffers as well. And there were some changes being made in that unit that were set in place before I got into it, and I didn't agree with those changes. Neither did a couple of my handlers that they were affecting. And I don't know, to this day, I know I was right to fight this battle. And I'm pretty sure I was right in terms of why I was fighting it, that the outcome I was striving for, that we wanted as a unit, was probably the right outcome. But my biggest failure was how I went about it. And I didn't approach it right. And I made it more of a battle than it needed to be. And looking back with the experience I got subsequently as a leader, and the learning I did both academically and experientially as a leader, I look at it and I think I should have done that far differently, and I might have better served my unit if I did. The officers in the unit might have gotten a better result. And the big push was over a master handler being removed from the unit. And ultimately, that it went through the way that the command wanted, and I lost that battle. And things turned out well for that handler. He retired as a major, so I mean, he had a great career afterwards. But when you're a leader, you're supposed to be serving the people that you're leading, their interests, and the decisions you make have an impact on them. And I think I failed not only to be successful in that battle, if you will, in that struggle, in what we were trying to accomplish, but it might have been that I failed because of how I went about it, and that wasn't fair to the men and women in that unit. And so how did I respond to that? I learned from it, and eventually learned to be more diplomatic, no less direct, but more diplomatic, to think a little bit more globally, to not take things personally as much, and so forth. Now, that didn't make me want to quit by any means. So it doesn't exactly fit your question there, but it certainly was a setback. In my writing career, those setbacks happen intermittently throughout my career. And it really boils down to one thing. It boils down to, wow, I wish I was more widely read than I am currently being read. Now you can measure that by your social media profile, or your sales figures, or whether people are asking you to come on their podcast or not. But you look at other people in the field who are very successful, from your A-listers all the way down to your peers who are enjoying more success than you at the moment, or appear to be. And I think my biggest failure has been at times to allow myself to be discouraged by that, and to feel like, why am I even doing this, and having these negative thoughts. And what I came to realize was two things. One, that I have to refocus on why it is I'm doing what I'm doing. And my wife has been great in keeping me from going down this, spiraling path of doom. And she just says, "Why are you writing? Are you writing to make $1 million?" Well, no, I'm not. I'm writing because that's who I am. I'm a writer. I can't not write. And so, what's my purpose? My purpose is to connect with readers, and any connection is a success. And so I'm able to refocus and redefine my success in a way that makes sense. And then the other piece is, I remember a very common saying that's very true in the writing and publishing field, and that is, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And it's not a linear progression either. You're going to have setbacks, you're going to have surges, and all you can do is be true to your art, be as good of a business person as you can be, where that part is concerned. And honestly, this is part of my philosophy, is help others along the way, and gain satisfaction from their success, and maybe your small part in helping make that happen. And that's part of the reason why I started the podcast, is to promote other authors and to fulfill that piece of it, to feel the satisfaction of helping someone else on their journey, while and being a small part of it.
Mm. Yeah, like to support, just to add to what you were saying now, you know, I'm in the education field, so I'm a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually now recently teaching in a primary school, somewhere here in South Africa, right?
What do
So
you teach?
I teach, currently I'm teaching social sciences, but well, I didn't
No.
go for social sciences to school. I went for maths and CAT, computer application technology.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So unfortunately now, so I'm just hoping in the near future that I'm gonna land into one. Right. So there's nothing that makes me more proud than seeing my students do well academically, and and
Mm-hmm.
become successful in life. I mean, that feeling of helping them, it actually help makes me feel great, knowing that I've achieved what my heart desires. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, at the end of the day, they say teaching is about making a difference. It's not just about going to class. You open the mouth, you teach the content, and that's it. No, there's more to it. You need to really love it, because at the end of the day, you need to be patient. You need to
Mm-hmm.
understand the learner's current knowledge. So now
Some of
moving
the
on.
greatest people in my
Mm,
life,
mm,
influence wise, have
mm,
been teachers without a
mm.
question. And so I think you're absolutely correct. Teachers have
Thank you.
this wonderful opportunity to
Mm,
have such great influence. My
mm.
wife teaches middle
Wow.
school English
Mm,
and social studies, and so
mm,
I see it firsthand all of the time. I've taught a little bit myself, nothing like she has,
mm,
and there's such joy when you see somebody get it,
mm,
like whatever it is you're teaching, and suddenly the light goes on, and then not only do they get it, but then they
mm,
add something of their own to it that you had no part in imparting to them, but they come up with it on their own based on the seeds that you planted, and it's very satisfying.
mm, mm. That's absolutely correct. Hey, so now moving on to the next question. Right. There's people that would love to actually pursue the same career as the one that you're in, and I'm sure a lot of people right now, like as we're talking, they're probably writing, because I believe that writing is the way to communicate with the
Mhm.
world. Like I myself, I'm also writing, but I'm not. I'm writing something. It's like a mathematics book. I've taught mathematics for like a while, and I really understand it now. Right. So now to those with myself included, right, looking in terms of writing, right? So what advice would you give to those that would like to pursue that career, and also looking also on the side of you as a police officer?
Well, the police officer one is probably the easier to answer. I'll do that
Mm,
first. I think, law enforcement is one of those careers that used to be fairly, um, uh, I wouldn't say simple, but it required a few particular skills, and that was all. And those days are decades past. No longer is that the case. If you want to be a police officer, of course, you need to
mm,
be of high moral caliber, and you have to be a decisive person, and you have to care about people. But you also have to be able to do a myriad of different tasks. Now, most of them you'll be taught by the agency that hires you at the academy and in field training. But you have to have the capacity to talk to people, to understand computer systems, to be able to write a cogent report. You have to have the physical ability to engage in that part of the job when it's necessary. And so it's a tough job, but most of the skills, if you have the potential, the actual skills will be taught to you. And so the best thing you can do to prepare for that, I think, is one, live an ethical life from the beginning. Don't sabotage your chances of being able to get into law enforcement, because the screening process is very stringent. And educate yourself. Now, it used to be a high school diploma was all you needed, but most agencies have moved to some college, even to degrees. And so, but I wouldn't recommend necessarily a degree in criminal justice, which sounds antithetical, but you'll learn most of the things you need to learn about the career in the career. And yeah, maybe you'll get a little bit of a jump start if you have a criminal justice degree, but honestly, I think you would get more out of a degree in psychology, or a degree in sociology, or a degree in social work, a degree in business. I mean, any other degree, I think, gives you a real broad view of things that will help you in your law enforcement career. And then you just go through the application process, and things go from there. To get into a career as a writer at any stage of your life, the number one piece of advice that I would give, and I'm far from the first person to offer this advice, is read, read, read. Reading is absolutely the best preparation for writing. It does so many things for you. It's push-ups for your writing brain. Um, and and then I would say, the next piece of advice is to write, because you will get better by doing, and you learn the craft by doing. Another piece of advice about writing that I wish I had received earlier and been able to take advantage of earlier, but which has been instrumental in me making the transition to feeling like a real writer. And that is something that a guy named Gary Provost wrote in a book back in the 1980s called "Make Every Word Count." And "Make Every Word Count" was just a how to write sort of book. It was not really a textbook, but sort of a instruction book. And he it's pretty basic, and he writes about the craft aspects of writing, but he also talks about it from a, I don't want to say spiritual necessarily, but I can't think of a better term right now. I don't have a thesaurus handy, so we're just gonna have to go with spiritual. The parts of being a writer that speak to your human experience, not necessarily the craft itself. And one of the things that he said that stuck with me to this day, um, was that you should find another writer, or a small group of writers that you can connect with, that you can have a fellowship with, that you can go on this journey together with, because, and the quote was, sometimes another writer will understand what the rest of the world will not. In other words, another writer will understand the struggle you're having with this current draft. They'll understand how good it feels to get a story accepted, or have your book accepted, or to get a great review, or a reader sending you an email about how much they loved your book or this character. They'll understand all the ups and downs that go along with this journey, and they will help sustain you, and you will have the opportunity to do the same for them. And I didn't do that. I mean, I read those words in like 1987, and I probably didn't do that until 2004, and really became part of a community. The Short Mystery Fiction Society is an online community of people who write short mystery fiction. It's a great organization. It's been around for years. They give out an award every year called the Derringer Award for the best short mystery fiction of the year. And so the contacts I made and the friends I made within that group really helped. And then I made close friends with a guy named Colin Conway, who was another police officer who was also kind of rediscovering his writing desire around 2004. And we hooked up and started exchanging stories and getting coffee and talking about writing and encouraging each other and critiquing each other and so forth, and got the ball rolling. We ended up writing a book together set in my River City world, called Some Degree of Murder. It was the first collaboration that I did. And then years later, we got back together and collaborated on the Charlie 316 series, which is a 4-book arc that examines some of the difficult topics in law enforcement, the shootings that are questionable and corruption and so forth.
Mm,
I mean, they're thrillers, they're procedurals, they're not nonfiction, but it tackles some of those topics. And he's become a great writing partner, and those partnerships sustain you. Those partnerships, when you're feeling that spiral of, oh, why am I even doing this? I sold 2 books today. Oh my God, I suck. I'm horrible. Whatever. Those self-doubts that gnaw at everyone at some time or another. Those are the times where you can reach out to that friend, and that friend can tell you, dude, you published a book.
mm.
2 people bought that book with their money and are reading it. How
Mm,
many people in the world can say that? What is your goal? Well,
mm.
my goal is to meet, to touch readers. Well, you just touched 2. Congratulations. And you pull out of that spiral and you realize
Mm,
the way things really are. And so that
mm,
that fellowship that Gary Provost was talking
mm,
about, if I had had that in 1988 instead of
mm,
2004, I mean,
mm,
that's 16 years of that where would I be in my career now if I'd had
mm,
that support and that
mm,
interaction during that time period. So
mm,
I think that's important to look for,
mm,
um, and not 25 close friends either. 25 acquaintances is great, and
mm,
I'm not discouraging that, but I'm talking about a core group. 1, 2, 3, 4 people maybe,
mm, mm,
where you can really invest in the relationship and you can really benefit from it and benefit them
mm,
with your energy.
mm. No, looking going back to the point where you mentioned the books that you're writing and the kind of stuff that you touch on, right? I believe it's going to help actually a lot, especially the ones in the on the field, because I mean, given what's been happening around the world, people sometimes are failing to, be decisive. Like you said, this profession, like you need to be decisive, So from there, like you've mentioned, you've already touched people. So we believe that you're gonna touch, as many as possible. But as long as you understand one thing, that what, one soul at a time, you know. They say a baby before he walks needs to crawl. Then after crawling, you take baby steps. So now, looking at the people that have inspired you, right? Well, obviously, the your first partner that you've collaborated with writing the book, right? So obviously, there's what you call, he has influenced you in some way, right? So if I may ask, who are the 3 people that have influential the most to you?
3 people who have
Mm,
influenced me the most.
mm,
It, I guess it would be different people probably for the 2 different paths.
mm,
I mean, uh, uh, in law enforcement,
mm,
um, it wasn't any one person. It was a number of people whose example was uh, was exemplary. People who were capable of both doing the job,
mm,
which isn't always a pretty job, which occasionally involves ugliness,
mm,
now lawful and righteous actions that happen to be ugly when viewed. Um, and to be able to do that that dirty thing, these they're dirty, difficult things,
mm,
and yet maintain their integrity, maintain the ability to treat everyone with human dignity. And that's what I think is missing at times. Just as a sidebar, I think that's where a lot of the trouble comes in when it comes to law enforcement and their relationships with the community. But we could touch on that if you like later. And so there were a number of people who in my law enforcement career showed me that example, and I would be doing them a disservice by picking any one of them because there were a dozen of them,
mm,
um, and different men and women who showed me different pieces of that, and so that just speaks, I think, to the importance of mentors. And you as a teacher obviously know how
mm,
important mentorship can be, and that's huge. And that the one thing about mentorship that to me is a little different than a teacher per se is when I think of a teacher, I think of an individual teaching a group. And when I think of a mentor, I think of an individual guiding an individual.
mm,
And so there's a slightly different relationship there. And I think that the modeling behavior that you perform as a mentor
mm,
is so important, because that, those are the cues that the mentee, the person learning, is going to key on. And it's not always just what you say, it's what you do and how you do it.
mm,
And I had some bad mentors, a few, not a ton, but a few. And luckily I had enough good
mm,
mentors that I was able to realize the bad ones were not
mm,
great, and learn from negative examples
mm,
rather than emulate
mm,
what they showed me.
mm, mm,
And so that's where it's at, kind of in the law enforcement field. But in general, I had a couple of teachers in my life who they all they did really was just believe in me. I had a middle school teacher. Her name was Kathleen McHugh. She taught language arts, and a high school teacher. A couple of them, actually about three of them, a Spanish teacher, Teresa O'Halloran, and then a pair of English teachers, Don Wilson and Jim Schultz. And they were all great teachers. Each one of them was a great teacher, and I learned a lot academically from them. But from three of them, I learned simply that they believed in me, and that helped me believe in myself. And they accomplished that in different ways, but they all expressed that belief. They took me seriously. They took my writing aspiration seriously. They took my language skill set seriously. I mean, Mrs. O'Halloran, when she found out I was going into the Army, single-handedly made sure that I got into the language school and became a linguist, because she recognized where my skills lie, and didn't want me to end up doing something that wasn't really in my wheelhouse, that I wouldn't get anything from. And so I'm very grateful for that. And it was Don Wilson, who was an English teacher, who, in addition to what I've already described, taught me the importance of discipline by pointing out that I was lacking some, and that I'm a big hockey fan, and there's a hockey saying that says, um, that hard work beats talent unless talent works hard.
That's a great one,
And,
eh? I
and
have to
it's
admit,
one of the
yeah.
reasons I like the sport,
Mm,
because that's kind of the attitude, right? I mean, the lunch pail approach to the game is
mm,
is is what I like. But if you're extremely talented and you work hard, then you're going to succeed. And so his point to me was, look, you have some talents. Everybody does. These are yours. They exist, but you have to have the discipline to employ them and to do the work, and to don't rely strictly on your talents. Because I was the guy in school who, in the courses I was good at, which were not mathematics, so I envy you, I would
Eh,
not do the homework and get an A on
mm,
the test, so I get a C in
mm,
the course, and
mm,
everything was fine, right? And
mm,
that's what he was kind of referring to. And I learned, yeah, that I guess that's going to get by if you want to get a C in life, but if you
mm,
want to actually meet your goals,
mm,
you got to put that work in. And for those things you don't have the natural talent for, in my case, for instance, mathematics would be a great example. You have to put the work in if you just want to get a C. so, these people had tremendous influence on me, and I think it really points out how important it is to be a good mentor, and how important the role of teachers are in our society.
mm, mm. You'd be surprised by the amount of work that teachers put in. Hey, all those sleepless nights of them, preparing to
I'm
teach and
married to a
preparing
teacher. I would not be
to
surprised at all. I see how hard
yeah.
you guys work.
Yes, preparing to execute that lesson in a way that you would understand, and also to change the children's lives. It's something amazing. I don't know if you know Les Brown, or if you've heard of him before. Les
Who's
Brown.
that?
Les Brown, Leslie Brown.
I feel like I should
Yeah,
have, but it's not
yeah.
ringing a bell.
No, he's one of the great speakers there. He said at some stage was labeled, I can't think of the term, but it is something with mentally retarded. So, and the teacher is the one that actually, turned that around, helped him see life in a different way. Before moving, there's a story that I would actually like to share with you. Right.
Okay.
So before moving into the primary school that I'm teaching at now, I was at this high school where it's like um well, when I was there, like things were just not the way that I wanted it to be. So, but at the same time, also, the kids can see what other teachers can see as well. Right. So, this kid came to me after I said goodbye to them on my last day. He's like, say, I know, I would like to ask you not to leave, but it breaks my heart to see you go because I mean, at the end of the day, after I got, I know you guys probably when you gave out the results, academic results, you say ABC there in America, right? So here we just give out in percentage, right? So he got 49% and he was so happy. And it's like, after I got 49%, you made me realize that I can actually do more than I think I can because I'm so used to getting below 20%. And for me to get that mark, it came to me as a shock and it made me believe that, you are really here to help us and you're actually really, starting to turn my life around. Like I'm on the ninth grade and I'm 19 years old, but due to family circumstances, but I'm not letting that put me down. And that message to me, it really touched, really hit deep because I mean, coming from a learner, I mean, learners and teachers, they learn from each other, So I have
Well,
to
and let
say
me
that,
let me add let me add a
mm,
wrinkle to that. What you
mm,
did is that's just beautiful. I mean, that's a wonderful
thank you.
story,
Mm,
and there, having a law enforcement background, I can tell you that I think that influence that you had goes even further than that person believing they can succeed academically. I
mm,
think it was very likely reached out into the rest of that student's life, and probably, when people don't believe in themselves and when they don't feel good about themselves, when they lack self-esteem, when they think they're doomed to fail, that guides their actions. And I can tell you that many of the criminals that I dealt with, the habitual recidivist criminals that I had multiple encounters with over the course of my career, they had that mindset. And I'm not saying that that student was destined for a life of crime. I'm not saying that at
mm,
all, but I
mm,
am saying that that mindset might have led that person in that
mm,
direction, or they may have fallen prey to it, and you change that mindset. It's very possible that you affected their life in an even larger way than you might realize. So I mean, I think that's a just a truly beautiful story.
Thank you. I mean, that story, it's actually one of the, something that actually, even drives you to go even stronger,
Mhm.
because I mean, knowing that you've touched the lives that tells you that, you're being successful at what you're doing. And the
Mhm.
more you're becoming successful is the more you go and go without stopping
Mhm.
so moving on to the next question now. Well, this one here, I'm just going to focus on the resources that you've used, right? So as human beings, to grow, we need resources. I mean, we cannot just wake up and just say we know everything and we don't need any resources. I mean, like you've mentioned that we learn every day, So I just would like to ask you, what are the resources that have best helped you along the way?
Well, people, to be
Mm,
honest with you, are the greatest resource for the law enforcement career.
mm,
Absolutely, that's the
mm,
case. Um, Other people's knowledge and
mm,
enthusiasm and viewpoints. Data is important, but
mm,
anybody can get you data. You can get data. Somebody can find data for you. Data is data.
mm,
But how data can be interpreted and applied, that comes from people. And so the hands down, in law enforcement, people was the greatest resource. And one of the things that I do feel good about in my career as in law enforcement, particularly when I got into leadership roles, was my willingness to listen to people and make sure that they were heard. and to truly consider what it is that they were bringing to me. I had the benefit of being the K9 unit commander and the SWAT unit commander at different times, and neither of those were positions that I had held as an operator. And so when you have an elite unit like K9 or SWAT, of people who work incredibly hard to attain the skill set that they have, and they're operating at high standards, and then you come in never having had to prove yourself and never having done that, I mean, there's a danger there as a leader. And I knew that coming in, and I said to myself, hey, you weren't a canine, you were never SWAT, and now you're supposed to be the unit commander. You have to approach that with a great degree of humility and a desire to learn. And that's what I did. And what I found very quickly was, in both instances, when the members of that team saw that that was a sincere desire to learn, that the humility wasn't being faked because it was something I learned at a workshop or something, that I really truly did want to learn and to use that knowledge to be a better commander and to serve the interests of the unit, they threw themselves wholeheartedly into teaching me and answering my questions, and sharing with me the reasons and the hows and the wherefores. And that was a huge resource. And so I never became adept to the degree of any of the operators, not even close. But they didn't want that from me. I mean, they didn't want me to jump in the car and take their dog out if they were sick one day. That wasn't my purpose. My purpose was to know intimately what it is they do and why, so that as the leader, I can make sure that they have the resources to do what they need to do. But they were the resources for me to make that happen. So people are a huge resource. Um, and then in the writing career, it's much the same, but it takes the form not necessarily always of a one-to-one conversation like this, although that certainly fits as well. But all that printed material out there, all those books that people have written, that's a huge resource to go out there and to read what other people have written in your field, or any writing that you read is going to help you as a writer. All the technical writing I did when I wasn't writing fiction, writing police reports, writing college papers when I was getting my undergraduate degree, all of that benefited me as a writer, and all the reading that you do, regardless of genre or type, will benefit you. But the people are also a resource. I mean, showing your work to another writer or a group of writers or a group of readers, they're going to catch things that you just flat out didn't catch, whether it's a typo or it's a story issue or a character issue. And so that feedback is absolutely crucial. So I guess, the number one answer in both categories is definitely people are the resource. Another resource, though, is your own willingness to do the work yourself. And in other words, the internet is a great place. I mean, it's full of stuff that's useless too, but it's a great place to go out and find the resources to better your own knowledge base. And regardless of whether your goal as a writer is to have your book published by a large publisher, or whether you want to be with a small press, or whether you want to publish it yourself, the resources on how to do that are out there. And if you do the research, you're going to find the answers, and you just have to be willing to do enough research to ferret out the good advice from the bad, the consistently good advice versus the people who just want you to give them your money. And so that's, I think that's another great resource.
No, I like the fact that you mentioned people and the internet. I mean, it's and also, I remember that earlier you mentioned something about a mentor. I do have a mentor myself as well, and
Good.
she's really, really influencing me like a lot, And you'd be surprised that we met. Right, so we basically met as me reaching out, for her to be a guest at one of my shows, right? So, and also reading, and a lot of stuff on the internet. That's where I spend too much time, actually, because on the internet there's a lot to learn. I believe that we learn every day, and the only way to learn is through reading. like you said, it doesn't matter what you're reading. At the end of the day, there's benefits because it actually helps you think a lot better than you actually do. So I really support that what you just said. Right. So and now, right, so looking at different careers, each and every career has a myth. Right, people would say a lot of things about different careers. Right, so I like to use the one of an educator because I'm in the education field. Right, so they say, for example, teachers work lesser hours compared to other professions. Right. Of which, yes, at school at some point, yes, but not entirely. Well, let me say, not even say at some point. Let me just say it's actually false, because why? Teachers, you would say that teachers don't have a life, eh? Because I mean, well, I know that like the contracts say probably 7 to 2, which is like 7 hours, or sometimes 6.5 hours, right? So, but that doesn't mean that they don't stay behind. They do stay behind, to prepare for the lessons, to mark
or
the
take work home and do it there.
yes, yes, do it at home. And also sometimes it even costs their relationships, because I mean, no partner, like every partner wants that attention at home. If somebody's gonna be working every single time, then they feel that they come last. And teachers have tendencies of talking about the children and focus a lot more on them than just focusing on their family. Right, because like I said, it's about making a difference. It goes with passion. It comes from deep within. Right. So looking at the ones that you're in now, as a writer and as a police officer, what is the myth around those two professions that you would like to actually expose the falseness of?
Well, before I do that, I have to say I completely agree with you on this myth about teachers, and it's particularly frustrating watching my wife work as hard as she does and put as many hours in, and her own money, a ton of her own money,
Yeah.
um, and then have things happen where with the COVID-19 outbreak, everybody was doing remote learning for a while, and then hybrid learning and so forth. And in the past year, she's worked way harder than even in a regular year to make that happen. And then there are people out there who are, and I'm not trying to be rude, but this is the only word to describe what they're saying, who are flat out ignorant of this fact, and who are saying, our teachers have been sitting at home getting paid for doing nothing. And I'm like, well, she's been sitting at home for 8, 10 hours a day doing a lot to make this happen so the kids can get an education. And so that's such a falsehood that teachers have it easy. They work a ton. So I'm glad you brought that up. So for law enforcement and writing, the biggest myths that I wish people would not buy into. For law enforcement, I think it's the myth of what they see on TV and in the movies. The images, the stereotypes, everything surrounding cops and detectives, police officers, is just so 90% untrue. And I don't just mean small details that are irritating for people who are in the profession, little details. I mean just in the broader sense of things. um, the men and women that I worked with in my career, and even after my career for about 4 years, I traveled across the United States and Canada teaching a leadership course, very intense leadership course. And so I was still in that in the profession in that way, and had exposure to people from all across the continent. Um, and in almost every case, and just the vast majority of cases, the people that I knew and encountered were hardworking, dedicated people who, while some of them had grown cynical in the job, which is certainly that is a true danger that does occur, they still wanted to do the right thing. They still wanted to help people. That's literally why they were doing the job in the first place, and why they were still doing the job. And I think, but they're people. They're human beings, which means they live their life just like you and I. They have families, they have hobbies, they have, they like to go on vacation. Like they like to watch some of the same shows that you watch. They want to play softball recreationally in the summer. They have barbecues. I mean, whatever it is you do, there are cops out there doing it too, because they're just people. And particularly in my River City series, one of my goals was to show that more human side of the police officer, so that people might start to see a person first and a badge and a uniform second, because I think that much of society does it the other way around. They see the symbol of the badge and the uniform and the gun and the handcuffs and the police car and all that goes with it first, and then maybe understand that there's a man or a woman who may be black, white, or Latinx or Asian, or maybe you don't even know, you can't tell because of their features are so nondescript, but you don't even bother to look because all you see is the badge and the gun. And I would like to dispel that myth that that's what everybody is. They're a person. And you know what? People are doing the best that they can. They make mistakes sometimes. Sometimes those mistakes are tragic and should have consequences. Just because it's a mistake doesn't mean you don't have to pay the consequences for the mistake. But I think if people saw the law enforcement officers out there as people first, um, then they would be less likely to assign a negative intent to the actions that they're looking at right out of the chute. Because it's easy, it's all about prejudice in general, right? I mean, it's easy for somebody to say, I don't like X, whatever that is, a race, a sexual orientation, uh, particular person from a particular country, a religion, whatever it is. It's easy to just say or believe you don't care for those people, I suppose. It's a lot harder when you know an individual who just happens to have that characteristic. And I can't tell you how many times, I guess, to put it in police terms, I frequently, no, not frequently, occasionally, especially as a patrol officer, you would get a citizen who would come on a ride along. They would ride with you for the shift, and they get to observe and experience somewhat what you go through. And it's a great feature in a community. It really helps, uh, uh, I think, with the understanding between the two. But inevitably, if someone came out, they would always be surprised about some of the things that you experience as a police officer, and that's a whole 20-minute conversation. But the point I want to make here is that if they were negative about the police when they started the ride along, almost invariably by the end of the night, you would be, I would hear something like, I don't really like cops, but you're okay. I like you. You're one of the good ones. And that's because they got to know me, and they got to know me as a person who was a police officer, not as a police officer who may or may not be a person. And that resulted in, maybe them having a little bit different attitude. Now, cops need to do that about the community as well. The reverse is also true, I should point out. But if we could get rid of that myth, I guess, or that misunderstanding, or that view of the badge first and see the person first, then I think we would solve a lot, or at least make some progress on a lot of the problems that we're facing. And as far as writing myths, I don't know. I'd have to think about that. That's a different one entirely. I think maybe the myth that we're making millions of dollars is a good one to get rid of. Most writers make very little. Most writers, even those who are approaching it as a career, make hobby level income with it. And so maybe maybe as a reader, if you like a writer's work, then support that writer. Now, I don't mean send them hundreds of dollars even, but be willing to buy the book, and maybe share the information, and be supportive, and that, I think, that might help writers be more successful. And it's like any business, really, if you get right down to it. If people say support local businesses, right? Because if you don't support local businesses, like they'll go away. And that's just the reality of it. Well, eventually, if you don't support the writers that you like, or the musicians that you like, or the filmmakers that you like, pick your artistic endeavor, they may not be able to continue to either create that art or create in a way that it can be shared with you. And so maybe that's a myth worth busting, that we don't need more support.
No, yeah, you just shared something very interesting, eh? Something that I really actually, never thought about, but there's it's actually great that you actually shared that with us, right? Because I mean, I have to say that ever since we started here from the beginning, everything that you're saying to me, I'm finding it very, inspirational. I'm finding it very informational and instrumental, to my development, and not only to my development alone, but also to I believe also to other people who'll be watching and or listening to this, right? So I really have to say that it's actually an honor to actually have you on our show, right? So now I would like to ask you, where can our listeners connect with you online?
Probably the easiest way is directly at my website, which is just frankzafiro.com, FRANKZAFIRO.com. And everything that I've written is on Amazon, and there's an author profile there as well, and that's just as good a place to start too. And I make a point of I don't receive so many emails from readers that I can't answer them all. And so even if it takes me a few days occasionally, I always answer emails that I get from readers, because I'm thrilled that they sent me a message, to be honest with you. And I remember um, getting responses, and we're talking, 30, 40 years ago, from writers that I wrote to. You talked about people influencing you earlier, and in the writing world, I would say I was very much influenced by some of the writers that I read as a young man, as a teenager. People like Piers Anthony, who's a fantasy science fiction author, and so forth. And I actually wrote the guy, letters, and he wrote back. I mean, I got little 3x5 cards of typewritten notes from him with the
Wow.
strikeouts on the errors, and but he took
Mm,
the time to do that to people who
mm,
wrote to him, and it
wow.
made such an impression on me, and it made
Mm,
him such a real person,
mm,
and it encouraged me to continue on my journey. And so I have nowhere near the success or profile as he does, but I remember that. And so when someone writes to me, I make sure to do the same thing. I make sure to respond
mm,
and have a conversation with them if they are if they reach out.
mm.
So
Right. So just to also make it clear out there, I believe that on Amazon as a writer you go by your pen name, right, which is Zafiro.
that
So
is correct.
for to find the profile, we should actually just search for Frank Zafiro. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's correct. I write
Mm,
under my Frank Scalise name, my
mm,
given name as well. And I
mm,
actually am starting in the fantasy
mm,
field under the name Frank Zafiro.
mm,
So I've got three different profiles on Amazon.
mm,
The
mm,
Zafiro profile is far more robust than the other two
mm.
at this point.
Wow. Okay, great. Thank you for sharing that with us. Right. So if you could step into my shoes, right, what is the one question that you would have liked for me to ask you? Like, what would you ask yourself that I didn't? I mean, I tried to ask as best questions as possible. Like you've said, some of them are best, and I really appreciate that. Right. So I just would like to ask you that if you could step into my shoes, what is the one question? Like, what would you like to add to my questions that I did not ask you?
Well, that in itself is a good question.
Thank
um,
you.
I think the question I would
Mm,
like to get is,
mm,
what do you think is the solution to the rift between law enforcement and parts of the public or the public at large, at least in the US today?
Mm, mm. I think that's like a very good question. I mean, like that's a question also that that I'm actually interested to actually hear the response to. I mean, like, well, it's just gonna quench my curiosity now, you know.
Well, and it's a question I think that it's such a multi-layered issue, and there's so many tentacles coming out from each layer that are intertwined with so many different factors. But at its basest point, I think it comes down to two things. I think it comes down to trust and it comes down to communication. Now, the trust part is that, in law enforcement, it's a position that you've been given a great deal of authority, and with that authority, comes trust. People have to trust that you're going to wield that authority appropriately and on their behalf for their benefit. And clearly, in our society today in the U.S., um, that trust is broken, even in relationships where it hasn't, because of something that happened in Minneapolis or in Los Angeles or in Texas. It's been broken in Topeka. I mean, it's been broken it was broken in Spokane. I mean, the world we live in is so small in terms of availability of information now, that events that happen 100,000 miles away ripple into your community. And so as a law enforcement officer, you are essentially carrying the load of the sins of all law enforcement officers. And that's difficult. Even when I came on, that was the case. I mean, the Rodney King incident happened about a year before I came on the job. And, I was being, people were throwing that up in my face. And I wasn't even a cop when it happened. I certainly wasn't in LA, and I certainly wasn't on that call, and I didn't do those things, but I still had to deal with the fallout of them. And that's, you can say that's fair or unfair. It simply is, and you have to deal with it. And so that's caused this. So this trust is broken, or at least damaged in most communities, whether directly by the agency there or not. It's still damaged, and that has to be repaired. And as you know, trust is a much easier kept than repaired. And then that's where communication comes in, though. I think the problem in our society, and it certainly exists within this uh, realm that we're talking about here, is that people aren't necessarily, they're so entrenched that they're not necessarily communicating for the purposes of listening, learning, or exchanging ideas or understanding. More often, people are waiting for their turn to talk, or they're listening with an eye towards how to defeat the argument that they're facing, as opposed to learning from it. They don't seek out information in their news; they seek out confirmation of their views, and this doesn't help. And again, I'm not. This is the police are guilty of this. Some members of the community are guilty of this, and I understand why. I understand why people are so angry that they aren't in a position to listen to anything right now because of what has happened and where they are right now. Completely understand that. I also completely understand why some police officers feel that way. It's a profession that, much like teaching, it's a profession that everybody thinks they understand but don't. And that everybody thinks you work for them because they pay your salary, and so they're the boss of you, and they should be able to tell you how to do your job, even though they don't really understand your job. Um, it's like teaching in that regard. And so I understand why that creates a little bit of an insular response from law enforcement. But the problem is we're not listening to each other. And until we really communicate in a way with I guess, an open heart and an open mind, and really listen to each other, we're not going to make progress. I mean, people in the community need to understand why the police do things the way they do them, and where they made a mistake and where they didn't make a mistake, and where the intent is and where there isn't intent. And if you have a better understanding of the profession, I think you can better gauge whether something was a mistake, whether it was purposeful, whether there was nothing wrong with it at all, or everything wrong with it. But conversely, and I don't think a lot of my peers in law enforcement like to hear this, but it's true. We need to change in law enforcement the way that we see the world. I mean, we have some blue blindness that we need to rid ourselves of. We need to be willing to share these things with the community that we're in, and help them understand and listen to their perceptions and why they see things the way they see those things. And that's hard to do if you feel like you're being attacked, and you get defensive, and they don't understand, and well, maybe they don't, but you still have to listen. And we're not doing ourselves any favors, I guess, is what I'm saying. And so, I mean, yeah, it's not, I'm not dropping any major bombshells here by saying, we need to listen and understand each other, and to make some progress. And in fact, I would go a step further and say the biggest thing we need to understand is that it's not an each other. It's not two sides. It's all one thing. I mean, having been in law enforcement, but for a career, but now having been out of it for like 8 years now, certainly 4 or 5 being completely out of it, I see both sides of the discussion really well, and my views are a little bit moderate in regards to taking a side, so to speak. And I catch some flack occasionally about, hey, you need to pick a side. You're either, back the blue, or, defund the police. Pick a side. It's cowardly not to pick a side. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I feel like Mr. Pink from the movie Reservoir Dogs sometimes. I don't know if you saw that Quentin Tarantino film years ago, but there's a point where all of these criminals who just did a robbery are arguing about whose side are you on? Whose side are you on? And this character, Mr. Pink, played by Steve Buscemi, I'll paraphrase so that this isn't profane, but he says, forget sides. What we need here is a little solidarity. And so I tend to agree with them. I think we need to realize that Robert Peel had it right when he said, the police are the public and the public are the police. It's not two sides, it's one side. And so let's actually listen to ourselves in a way that maybe we can get some progress. And that comes with admitting our faults and our failures in law enforcement. And it comes from on the community side, I think, from maybe giving officers the benefit of their intent until it's shown otherwise. And that's just a start. We could talk about this for 4 hours and not even, scratch the surface.
But I have to say to you that I have much respect for police, police officers. I mean, that's one tough profession. I mean, you have to serve and protect the country, and in protecting, in doing so, a lot of things can happen. It's not. I don't think it's even easy to actually wake up and just say, um like, I'm going to work. I mean, like the fact that you love it is going to drive you there, but that there's things that can happen that might, even or might even take your life away. You never know. Like you're dealing with different people, and some of them, they fail to rationalize, and sometimes they even it comes down to being to the police officers being wrong, and then now you have to carry that with you, that pressure from the public, so
It is a
I
tough
really,
job. You're absolutely right. It's an extremely difficult job. But the fact that it's a difficult job doesn't give you a pass on doing anything unethical on purpose. I mean, there's no pass for that. But I'll tell you that the people who hate dirty cops the most are other cops. And even and it's the same way with incompetence. I mean, there's so much transference that occurs when somebody sees a police officer do something, whether it's unethical or just incompetent or just rude, or act like a jerk. that transfers to everyone else who wears the badge. And so those who do wear the badge and don't do those things, people who are ethical, who treat people with dignity no matter what the situation is, who are professional, they can't stand those few cops who don't do that more than, and probably even more than, the community itself.
mm,
But nobody said, you weren't drafted into being a police officer in my country. You
mm,
signed up, and so you
mm,
accepted these responsibilities, and sometimes they're not fair, but uh, regardless of whether they're fair or not,
mm.
you have to still perform to the best of your abilities, and you can't. There's no excuses for not doing the best that you can do.
And also looking at the fact that you need to be able to make quick decisions. I mean, some things
Mm-hmm.
just happen on the spot that, for you to think positively, to think positive, it might be a challenge. Sometimes you end up thinking negative. Sometimes you think positive. I mean, waking up in the morning to, like, going to work, knowing that some stuff like that might happen, where you're forced to make decisions. And because sometimes we make decisions, and then we're like, oh, after a little while, when you reflect back, you're like, yo, I could have done this, but why didn't
Mm-hmm.
I think about it this way? So like you said, I think you need to also, like read, also maybe read like the kind of books that you wrote to actually, like I said, I feel like they're gonna help like a lot of police people out there, help them act ethical, as to also, prevent all these other things that are happening, so we can also, come together as one, people and the police officers, like you said, we don't need to see the badge thing, we need to see the human being first, so going on to the sorry, I thought
I was just going to say, you make a great point, and that is that
mm,
not all of the time, but
mm,
enough of the time that it's something to consider.
mm,
The police officer makes decisions
mm,
in a very short uh, amount of time, maybe
mm,
even an instant,
mm,
without full knowledge of all the facts, and they have to
mm,
make a judgment based on what facts they know or perceive at
mm,
the time in an instant. And sometimes they get it wrong. I mean,
mm,
the sheer number of times that they don't is actually very encouraging. But unfortunately, because the stakes are so high in the things that we do, those mistakes are quite glaring and can be tragic. And the I think the problem comes in sometimes, though, when malicious intent is immediately applied, and people have the luxury of more information, more time, considerably more time, to view the situation, and it gets reviewed through that lens rather than through the lens of what the officer was experiencing. And while the law has in the U.S. has been pretty has recognized that it's unfair necessarily to view it outside of the scope of what the officer knew at the time and could perceive at the time. Certainly, in the court of public opinion, it's done, through 2020 hindsight and with all the knowledge of everything that is available to know, and people have the time to pore over it and to think. And that's just, I mean, that's the reality of what we're dealing with. But and that's not even talking about what implicit biases the officer may have that they're potentially even unaware of that drive their action. That's a completely different conversation, that I think is a valid one. But it's hard to be an officer faced with a situation, to deal with it in a second,
mm,
a literal tick of the clock,
mm,
with 10% of the available information, and to process it and make a decision, and then be wrong. I mean, but have your decision be viewed through hours and hours and hours and days of scrutiny with 100% of the information available. That can be discouraging, and I don't know that it's entirely fair.
mm. No, you make a very great point there, actually. All right, so well, this brings us to the last question. This is actually one of my favorite questions, right? So because I believe that we as individuals, like I've mentioned earlier, and also you've mentioned that, we learn every day, right? Why do we need to learn? The world is an ever-changing place, and the only way to keep up with it is through learning, right? So learning can be done in different ways. It can be like through your experiences, it can be through reading, it can be like through studying, but at the end of the day, we're learning. Like you said, when you read, you learn something. It doesn't matter what you're reading, but the fact that you're reading means that you're learning. And I believe that for one to engage in that process, one needs to be determined. You need to have a strong heart. You need to understand that at some point you're going to fail, but how you're going to take those failures, it's up to you. So the word learning, what does it mean to you?
Well, it is, it's an active
Mm,
verb, right? I mean, it's a process. It's a
mm,
never-ending process. It doesn't stop. You don't learn something and you're done.
mm,
I mean, you continue to
mm,
learn, and sometimes for the sake of it, just for the sake of it. I mean, I mentioned to you that I'm poor at math, and that's very true. And I haven't been very motivated to learn very much about mathematics, but I'm also poor at like music, at rhythm, and all that kind of stuff. I'm just not that good at it. But years ago, I picked up the guitar and struggled mightily
mm,
to learn a little bit, and I still struggle,
mm,
and I still learn,
mm,
and it's not something that I am good enough at. Like, I'm not going to pick up the guitar and entertain you here. You
mm,
would cringe, most likely.
mm,
And so I'm not doing it for anyone other than myself. And I guess I make my wife endure it a little bit.
mm,
But the point is that it's something I'm not particularly skilled at, but it is something that I love. I mean, I get great enjoyment out of playing, finally being able to play a song at least well enough
mm,
that you could recognize it was a song, and maybe
mm.
even the particular song that I'm trying to play. And that brings me joy. It brings me
Mm,
satisfaction. And the
mm,
fact that little by little,
mm,
small, tiny increment by tiny increment, I
mm,
continue to improve, um, kind of illustrates how I see the word learning. It's a constant process that you're doing for the joy of it,
mm,
that you are getting satisfaction from, that happens continually, but maybe in small increments, and is never going to stop. I mean, unless I just never pick up the guitar again, I guess, or never think about it again, I'm going to continue to learn a little bit more and a little bit more. And I think that applies to whatever endeavor it is that you're talking about. I mean, I love history. I love learning about history. That is such a massive subject that I'm never going to learn everything about history, not even about one small. I mean, there are historians who specialize, down to the granular, and they don't know everything about that. But I can learn a little bit more as we go. I can feel satisfied with that knowledge. Obviously it brings me joy, and the same is true with writing. The same is true with everything. And so that's what learning means to me. It's about bettering yourself. I mean, basically, learning is about broadening your horizon.
mm,
Um, it's about the satisfaction you get from doing
mm,
that, how you can
mm,
apply that to your own world,
mm,
and the joy that you get from it, and most importantly, that it's a never ending process. And I
mm,
think that those people who live long lives,
mm,
um, when they're active and happy in the later years of their
mm,
lives, almost
mm,
all the time you hear them say it's because
mm,
they never stop learning, they never
mm,
stop exploring, and that
mm,
keeps their mind vibrant and alive, and
mm,
it keeps them engaged in this world. And so I think that's important. And so that's what learning means to me. I think it's a very active, ongoing verb.
mm. No, that's actually a great one there. Like I like the fact that you actually said it's an active verb, like an ongoing verb. That's like really explaining what it really is. I mean, Right. So now that I've asked you all the questions, right, I just would like to ask you one more thing. Is there anything that you would maybe like to add about what you do? What you call this, about writing, or more about I know you've shared a lot about also being in the being a police officer, but if there's anything that you can share, maybe, and also about your website, and I believe you're a podcaster as well, right? So if you can just share
Sure.
with us what
Sure.
it's about, and what your focus is actually. What happened?
Okay. There we go.
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
uh,
I was wondering what happened, but it's okay.
I'll
Yeah.
start. I'll start that answer over. You
Okay.
want?
No problem.
Okay.
I appreciate that. Mm.
On the law enforcement side, I would just say that I would want people to know that the people doing that job are overwhelmingly dedicated,
Mm.
hardworking people who really do care.
Mm.
And that doesn't mean there aren't negative people in the
Mm.
profession. Every profession has that. It
Mm.
just has a more profound impact in law enforcement than in some professions. I think in the writing world, I think I'd want people to know that more than anything, we want that connection. Or as a
Mm.
writer, we want that connection with the reader. So if you read something and you like it and you want to read more, then read more. And if you want to reach out to the writer or write a review, reviews help a ton. Then do that, because that's what most writers want, is that connection.
Mm.
Um, and so I mentioned my website earlier, frankzafiro.com. That's probably the best place to get in touch with me. And one of the tabs on that website is my podcast, which is called Wrong Place, Right Crime, as in right, so the type keyboard. And I focus on mostly crime fiction,
Mm.
talking to crime fiction authors or people associated with that, maybe reviewers or editors sometimes. And the purpose of it really is to highlight these authors and to introduce them to readers. And my hope is that if someone's listening and they hear a particular author on there, and the author sounds interesting, and or their work sounds interesting, that they check them out. I do a feature episode every month that runs about an hour, and we get into kind of some longer conversations there. It's more of a
Mm.
FM dial late night drive sort of conversation where we go down whatever paths conversation takes us. But then on a weekly basis, I do open and shut episodes, which feature kind of a quick in and out sort of scenario. I'll get to know the author real quick, get to know their work real quick, and then it's done. Something you can listen to, on a trip to the grocery store or something. But both of those formats of the show are, like I said, all designed to just to feature those other authors and push their career along as much as possible. And honestly, in the time that since I've retired fully, and definitely during this year of COVID,
Mm.
it's also served as a nice social outlet for
Mm.
me.
Mm.
It's been my
Mm.
primary
Mm.
socialization opportunities as well. But we're about 115 episodes in right now, and
Wow.
uh, wrapping up the fourth season in June, and we'll start
Mm.
season 5 in September. And
Mm.
and I, my plan now is to continue to do it as long as there's an interest.
Oh, that means you've been at it for a long time. Hey, if you're dropping one every month and then you're at about 115, that's like, yo, a lot.
Well, I was
Uh,
doing one a month for the first year, and
mm.
then after that, I started doing the open and shut episodes as well,
Mm.
so then now I'm doing like four a month.
Oh, that's great. I'm not even there yet, but yeah, I'll get there one day. Right.
Oh, definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
With the focus you have, I think you've got a
Mm,
lot of
mm,
uh, longevity here
mm.
for this type of podcast.
Thank you so much, eh? So now I just also, would like to actually, thank you a lot for actually coming to share with us such a great content. I myself, without a doubt, I've learned a lot. And without a doubt, I do believe that it doesn't just go for me alone, it goes for others as well, who'll be listening to this or watching this. Right. So, and I understand that we live in a very busy world where, it's kind of hard for us to make time to steer people at the right direction. I really have to say that I really appreciate your effort and your energy and your time to actually come and share with us such an amazing content. It really means a lot to me and also to us as a company and to our listeners as well. So I just want to say to you, like, we very much appreciate your effort and energy.
Well, it's truly been my honor, and I appreciate the opportunity to have these conversations and appreciate what you're doing to share these kinds of conversations with people.
Thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. And I just want to wish you well in everything that you do and also with everything that you're focusing on. May it be what you hope for it to be. As long as you keep going, like you said, you need to understand that if you need something, you need to keep going. You need to work for it. It doesn't just come like that. So I just want to wish you all the best. And also, please tell your wife I said I love what she does and that she's not alone. That we're in the same team.
Definitely.
Yes. So
Thank you so much.
until next time, and also looking forward to a continued relationship.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So until next time. Such an amazing content had me really blown away. I really wasn't really expecting such an amazing content, but really I'm really glad that such content was shared. And ladies and gentlemen, I do believe and hope that you're feeling as much blown as I am. And if you'd like to get in touch with Frank Zafiro, please do so the details provided at the bottom of the screen. And in doing so, remember to like and subscribe. Ladies and gentlemen, like and subscribe so you're notified when a new episode is posted. That means you never miss any episode from us. Ladies and gentlemen, please do so. And I just want to also extend my gratitude and also to thank you guys very much to those of you that have liked our videos and to those of you that have subscribed to the page. Ladies and gentlemen, we do believe that we do hope and that you've enjoyed our previous videos that we've uploaded and that you're still going to enjoy the more videos that we have for you. Just remember, every Wednesday at 6:30, we drop a video, 6:30 p.m. That's Johannesburg Central. So it's time, Johannesburg time. Yes, here, right here in Pretoria, South Africa. Okay. Now, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching till the end, and do want to wish you a very lovely day, and may everything that you touch turn into the diamond, gold, or anything that you wish for it to be. And stay tuned for the next more episodes to come. See you next time. Peace and bye.